when we have the weekend to look forward to. We have had a great series of experts joining us that started with Wei Ying Chow from IES, and we talked about some evidence-based programs and the kinds of fidelity that they look at, that IES has supported. And then we went on to, actually, we didn't have what was the next session? It was me presenting. I don't remember. I think it was me presenting something, but now we have Jennifer Pierce sharing from AIR. She is part of the IMTSS, Integrated MTSS centers that form a larger effort that is supported by IES. And then next time we are going to have Rebecca Zumeta Edmonds from the National Center on Intensive Intervention. And she'll be talking about students with more intensive needs and how we think about fidelity for meeting their needs. And then after that, our next speaker is from, actually, it's from one of the regional education labs. Just thought about that fact. Yeah. So we'll talk about that. But the other speaker is Alexa Hudak from the Oklahoma SPDIG. And she's going to be talking about data collection, some of what they've learned about doing that for fidelity. So the expert series that you all requested, hopefully you are enjoying it. I know today is going to be great as we think with Jennifer Pierce, who was also our keynote speaker at the SPDIG National Meeting a few years back. We're going to be thinking about MTSS and the different features of that for fidelity. But she's also got a lot more knowledge that she has been able to integrate into her, she's been doing the coaching work, and that's what she shared with us before, but she's had lots of different efforts with SEAs and now this IMTSS work. So she gets to pull the experience and knowledge of really a comprehensive set of efforts. So Jennifer, welcome.
All right. Who knew it could still be hard to unmute after, X number of years in the virtual working world? But there you have it. So yes, thank you. Thank you for having me here. I am Jennifer Pierce. And while I do just a very short introduction to myself, please feel free to pop something into the chat from the icebreaker slide that we've got here. It's good to think about the positive things that are happening in our world on this Friday. And as you do that, I just mentioned I'll introduce myself in a little bit of a different way. And so I'm planning on facilitating another meeting later this week. And one of the ways that we're going to introduce ourselves is to find an object from your workspace and then bring that and somehow, illustrate how that, what does that represent for you personally and professionally? And I still have that little object right over here. This is a bright red lipstick, which is sitting over on my desk. And what the heck does this have to do with me personally and professionally? Well, whether it is personally or professionally, I tend to kind of be at one end or the other. I can be extremely extravagant. That is sometimes in the thinking, in the work that I do, kind of going into a risk-taking space and exploring topics that maybe don't get a lot of attention. However, I am also very practical. And this is perhaps the upbringing that I had from a very practical mother, where, whether you're exploring topics that maybe don't get a lot of attention in the past that are starting to get a lot of attention, like systems coaching, fidelity measurement, integrated MTSS. Those topics might seem a little out in space, unrelated to the day-to-day work that we're doing. And one of the things that I love is to explore those new spaces, but also ground them in the real work of what can happen in schools to benefit, of course, our students, but also benefit and help staff. So that is my little bit of an explanation of how I approach my world professionally and personally, and happy to share more about my background if that would be helpful in the future. All right, so I'm going to take a peek in the chat. Looks like a couple of people had offered up some ideas. Thank you so much. Please feel free to keep doing this as we go forward. So today, Jennifer mentioned, we've got two topics on our docket, systems coaching and integrated MTSS. Full disclosure, I don't know if we'll get to both of these topics today. We will go as slow and as fast as I think meets your needs and suits what is of most interest to you. And so we'll adjust accordingly. Whether we get to one or both of these topics, we do have at least one breakout group. We'll have a whole group discussion. I've got some resources at the end. And if you don't have the slide deck, we'll make sure that you get a PDF of that so that you can look at the resources if we don't have time to really dig into those. I always like to make sure everybody knows, even though we have, kind of designated times for whole group, small group discussion, any time is the right time to offer up your questions, your comments, your reactions. Please don't hesitate to come off of mute, pop a comment into the chat box if that is better suited to what you've got going on right now in this hour. But please definitely make sure that you offer up your contributions at any time, which is the right time to me. Our objectives relate over to the agenda that I just mentioned, again, talking about two topics and some recent developments of fidelity measurement in those two topics. And before we get any further, I just want to acknowledge, as we think about fidelity measurement, whether it is for systems coaching, integrated MTSS, you name it, whatever the topic is, there are many challenges associated with fidelity measurement. And so I've got some listed on this slide. There are probably others that are at the top of your mind. And I just want to acknowledge that fidelity measurement is something that typically does cause a lot of frustration and confusion and can be very difficult. And it is possible for us to overcome these fidelity measurement challenges and hopefully that's some good news. And I'm sure you've experienced some successes with that. And hopefully we have some time to talk about those successes today. The other thing that I want to just mention is some recommendations for measuring fidelity that also apply over to any topic, whether it is systems coaching, integrated MTSS, reading intervention. There's some things that we can think about and do that actually help to address some of those challenges that I had here on this slide, plus the others that maybe aren't listed here. And so I'm just going to quickly go through some of these recommendations so that we can also keep them in our mind as we go forward with our conversation today. Now, if you were a part of our conversation at the October, I think it was 2023 session that we had together, Jennifer mentioned this a few moments ago. These might link back to that conversation that we had then. Some of the points that I mentioned at that time, I'll mention again here because they still apply. These are kind of some guidelines or recommendations for measuring fidelity, again, so that you can approach this work in a way that helps to mitigate some of those challenges that do tend to crop up. And first of all, this might seem a little obvious, but whenever you undertake fidelity measurement, if you haven't already done so, to consider going back to explicitly identifying and articulating the questions you want to answer. What is the purpose of collecting the fidelity data to begin with? What do you want to learn? What do you want to know? And then, of course, not only identifying those questions, once we have those in mind and we've mapped out what those questions are, remember it's just as important to use the data. So we are very good at collecting data. Sometimes we're less good at using the data, but probably goes without saying, if we collect it, we use it. And then the other recommendation or guideline that I'll offer up here to the group is this is a slide that I showed that our last conversation that we had about this, again, that was October 2023. So it's been a minute. So I'll refresh your memory of this particular slide. Because given all of these challenges that we face with measuring fidelity, we want to try to make our lives as easy as possible. There's no point in swimming upstream, given that there are so many challenges with this particular effort. So to consider the existing infrastructure that we have in place and to try, when possible, to live in this space up here. So if we think about fidelity measurement, typically there are data collection strategies that are simpler, and then there are those that are more complicated. And then there are those that tend to have pretty strong buy-in and support, and those data collection strategies that people tend to not really appreciate very much. And those strategies are plotted out here in these three circles. And this is just from the experiences and interactions I've had with states and districts in as we've explored different data collection strategies for fidelity. And this might look very different in your context, but in general, self-reports like those logs on focus groups tend to have stronger buy-in and be simpler than a direct observation. Now, regardless of where these strategies shake out in your context, again, the idea here is that we might as well do what we can to live in this space up here, particularly as we get started with fidelity measurement. And that is just kind of a good rule of thumb as we go forward. All right. I got one other thing, and then I'm going to check the chat to make sure if there's anything that I need to circle back to. And this also falls into the category of thinking about how to make our lives easier when it comes to fidelity measurement. And when possible, not only do we consider the complexity of the strategy and the support or buy-in for it, ideally, we think about the different aspects of fidelity that we will be able to address through the data collection effort. And over here, you see I've got a listing of those different aspects of fidelity, like quality, exposure, responsiveness, adherence, and program specificity. And when we can, to try to hit more than one of these. Sometimes it's not possible, and that's okay. But when we can, this collecting on multiple aspects of fidelity, regardless of the strategy that we use, will hopefully allow us to have richer data and a more nuanced understanding of what it is we're trying to understand. Okay, so before that was a little bit of an overview, and next we're going to talk about systems coaching. But before we do that, I just want to pop over to the chat and see if there's anything there. Oh, thank you for all of these great positive comments about things that are happening in our world right now. All right. Okay, so I'm not seeing any
So,
questions or
Jennifer,
anything.
there wasn't a question. There was just one thing that I had added because you talked about using the data that you collected, and I
Yes.
added along to with that, sharing the results of the analysis with the people who were part of the fidelity measure,
Yes,
who were
what a
observed. Yeah.
critical point. Thank you for adding on. Absolutely. That really does help people better understand why the data are being collected and how they're being used and what it might mean to them. So thank you for adding on to that. That's really an important point. Okay, so let's get into our first topic, which is systems coaching. And this is, I get a little bit nutty about two particular topics of which I'm going to talk about today. Systems coaching is one of them. I'm not sure how many of you feel about systems coaching or instructional coaching, but if you're also a fan, this might be interesting. It might be interesting to you. But I recently, I guess over the past 2 years or so, have been exploring systems coaching fidelity measures. And this is through some of the work that I do with a couple of different states, one of which is a part of this community. That is the Rhode Island team. And in looking at the measures that are out there, I found some interesting things. First of all, there are very few measures. There are some, and I've got some examples that I will show you. And there's some common patterns across all of those measures. There's about 5 or 6 of them in total, at least that I could find. And nearly all of these measures are related to tiered systems of support, meaning that systems coaching is viewed as a support strategy for advancing tiered systems. And that was typical across all of these measures. One of the measures, only one, has been measured or has been tested for its psychometric properties, meaning it has been tested to see if it's valid and reliable. And this is actually a doctoral dissertation. And it is a self-report. And I'll come back to this question that I've got in italics here. All of the measures reflect that there seems to be a consensus as to what systems coaches need to know and do. That is reflected in the measures. And that the information that is collected in those measures all seem to be really grounded in the project or the state's definition of coaching. And most of these measures rely on self-reports, but one is a direct observation. And I mentioned I'd circle back to this idea here of, is it a fidelity measure? I've been kind of chewing on this idea that not all assessments that are out there are fidelity measures. And so what exactly makes up a fidelity measure? And what I'm still kind of on the fence about is if we can, in fact, call these the measures that are out there for systems coaching fidelity measures, at least for some of them. I think so, because I think they get at quality, but this could be kind of up for debate, since these are all things that are all fair measures that are fairly new. So this is one of them. It is I'm not sure if I'll say this correctly, EBIS, EBISS, Systems Coaching Self-Assessment. This actually, from what I understand, comes from the Oregon SPDIG from years ago. And maybe Jennifer or John, I don't know, or if there's an Oregon team member on board who might know the history of this tool. It's actually in McIntosh and Goodman's book on integrated MTSS. And it is a self-report of knowledge and skills, and I think gets at the aspect of quality in this particular assessment. And it does reflect their definition of systems coaching. This is that doctoral dissertation measure that I mentioned a few moments ago. It's also a knowledge and skills assessment, which I think you could argue reflects quality, a self-report of quality. And that one reflects Florida's definition of systems coaching. It's out of that doctoral student, I think, went to USF. Florida has another measure of systems coaching. This is also a self-report, but you can see here it's a rubric. So the systems coach would complete this and rate the quality of the degree to which they're meeting these look-fors, and again reflects their definition of systems coaching. So what I have learned is that states are really on the forefront of developing these systems coaching fidelity measures. Most of them, again, are self-reports by systems coaches, including this one here, which is from the Rhode Island team, which is a part of their current SPDIG. And if it's helpful, I can pull up the actual log. Essentially, the coach goes in and identifies what they did when they were supporting with the team, how long it was that they were coaching, like the duration, the adherence to systems coaching practices. So it does get at multiple aspects of fidelity and reflects that state's definition of systems coaching. And we are currently working on a direct observation measure. And this is something what we've been working on for almost about a year now. And if I'm not sure, I'll have to check to see if the Rhode Island team, I can't see everyone who's on the call, but they could also probably share a little bit more about what this process has looked like. But again, it is reflective of the state's definition of systems coaching, gets at multiple aspects of fidelity, including adherence, dose, and quality, and is the one that is a direct observation strategy that will be accompanying their coaching log. All right, so that's the landscape of systems coaching fidelity measurement. And we are going to go into our first breakout. So if you might want to take a picture of this just in case these prompts don't follow you into your breakout room. And we can talk through, elevate out whatever things come up in your breakout room. We'll have a little bit of time to elevate those things to the whole group. And I will also check the chat to see if there's anything else that has come up and then
No,
see if we are ready
nothing.
for breakouts.
Yeah,
Okay.
no questions in the chat.
Okay. All right. And please do let me know if you have questions before we do go into that breakout.
Well, while people are thinking about questions they might have, let me say I've got the breakout set. It'll be 4 to 5 people per room. When would you like to have people come back?
Yeah, let's do about, let me just check, maybe about 8 to 10 minutes, somewhere in that time frame.
Great. We'll come back in 8 minutes. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and grab Jennifer Pierce. Would you do me a favor and copy those 3 questions and put those into the chat?
Yes.
And people will have those as well.
Yes, I will do that right now.
Thank you.
Let's see.
All right, they'll probably copy over. Oh no, they don't look too crazy. There you go.
No, they were.
So if you haven't done so already, you can grab those questions out of the chat and we'll come back at, let's see, 32 past the hour. We'll see you soon.
So we can take as little or as much time as we need to on this. How did your conversations go? Questions, comments, things to elevate from your small group back up to the whole group.
In our group, we found that we were doing some of the same things to measure systems coaching. So it was kind of validating to hear from the others. It appears that we're all using some type of high quality coaching assessment. And we're using an activity log to capture what activities are happening and where most of our time is concentrated. And the other tool that was mentioned, the participating personnel survey, um, from participants, how they perceive the coaching supports that they've been receiving. So a lot of commonality in our group.
So data not only from the coach side, but also the people who are participating in the coaching.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. And for your group or any others, how are you sharing the data? How are coaches and or the teams that they support, are they getting data compilations or summaries of results, or is that a work that is in progress and to happen in the future? How is the group handling, anyone in any of the groups? How are you guys handling that?
In our state in Virginia, we tend to reproduce reports. So our coaches submit a coaching self-assessment. And once they do the coaching self-assessment, we produce like a state level report that kind of goes to like the state implementation. So we can use that data to help coordinate supports to our coaches, and we have professional learning community days once a month. Like that information goes to those groups to help put together that, and what we might, what we're going to focus on in future learnings with the state systems coaches. But we also give reports right back to the state, like the coaches, on the data they submit, and we do it over time, so like they can see where they've improved or not compared to previous years. We also, depending on the data, like we produce state level, we produce reports to the different audiences. So we tend to tailor reports to whatever audience we are submitting, sending it to. Like division districts and schools, they get reports on their data that they submit. Our coaches, they get the reports on their districts and schools they support. State level, like different work groups and teams and such, get the data reports for that would be useful to them to guide parts of their work. We even put some of our data onto our annual report that we put up on our website, especially when it comes down to perception, because a lot of our districts seem to they really have high regard of their state systems coaches. So we brag about that because, well, it's worth bragging about that they're happy with the work the supports they're receiving. So that's what we kind of do.
Oh, wow. Very comprehensive. A lot of different pathways for sharing that information, celebrating the successes, which absolutely is so important, and a clear priority. And the other thing I wanted to just throw out to the group is if you have a systems coaching measure that you'd be willing to share, I'd love to see it. As I mentioned, most of these are from state projects, efforts. Probably the SPDIG, it was the starting point for a lot of the ones that I've encountered. And so I'm curious to see these. And I think there's still potential if you have an interest in this, for those of you who are interested in systems coaching fidelity, of getting these out into the research space as well, because I think right now the field is definitely leading what is happening with systems coaching, fidelity measurement, and the research is definitely further behind. And so I think there's an opportunity there for, if that is something that is of interest to any of you, just for your consideration. Other comments, questions, reflections from your small group to elevate up? Okay, I think I gave the right amount of teacher wait time, which sometimes can help make sure we cover all of the thoughts that are out there in the room that didn't quite get addressed. But of course, if you have other things from that systems coaching topic, please don't hesitate to get those out. Is not the last opportunity for you to share those thoughts before we switch gears over into our second topic, which is integrated MTSS. And I have a feeling that many of you are familiar with this terminology, integrated MTSS, but I think it's new enough where it warrants taking just a few moments to make sure that we all kind of are grounded in the same understanding of this new iteration of integrated MTSS, which I will say is an evolution, I guess. Maybe not an iteration, but an evolution of MTSS. And there's a QR code up here in the top right-hand corner that'll take you over to a document that further expands on just the information that I have here on this particular slide. In fact, maybe I've got my camera's pulled up and that might be blocking it. So let me move some things around here. Okay, all right. So if you want more information about various tiered systems of support. I'm sure you're very well versed in these, but take a peek if you like at the articles and information that are associated with this QR code. And essentially, integrated MTSS, as I said, is an evolution of MTSS. And the idea with integrated MTSS is that it is aimed at addressing some of the implementation challenges that we often experience with MTSS. That's why it's an evolution of it. And some of those challenges, the main challenges is that we tend to implement the academic side of our tiered system and the social, emotional, behavioral side of our tiered system parallel to each other. And with integrated MTSS, there is a strategic, intentional effort to bring those two sides together to better meet the comprehensive needs of all of our students. And that essentially is what integrated MTSS is. This is something that I think is becoming definitely more talked about in the research world. And it is also, as I mentioned, becoming more prominent in the practice that we have going on in tiered systems implementation in our schools. So the IES over, I'd say about 5 or 6 years now has been integrated MTSS. One of the studies that I'm going to talk a little bit about is a part of that. It's the IMFR Integrated MTSS Fidelity Rubric Study, but IES put together a collection of studies, and all of these relate to integrated MTSS. And there's a couple of resources that have produced findings from this collection of studies. And the one that I'm going to talk most about here today is the integrated MTSS or IMFR study, because that is focused on measuring IMTSS fidelity. So if this is something you're interested in, the tool is free and publicly available. It is focused on elementary MTSS. I think I've actually talked to this group a little bit before about this. And so here what we're going to focus in on is what does this tool measure and what was the need for it? So at the beginning of the time that we started studying this, there wasn't a measure of integrated MTSS that had been tested for its psychometric properties. And since IMTSS was becoming more prominent in schools, there was a need to have a measure that had been tested and grounded in its validity and reliability. And so now the IMFR meets that need and it has been shown to have strong reliability as well as various aspects of validity. This is just a screenshot of the tool itself, and I wanted to unpack how this measure addresses the different aspects of fidelity. So first of all, this measure addresses items like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and so it assesses the degree to which those critical components of integrated MTSS are in place, the degree to which a school adheres to those critical components. It also assesses quality because one of the things that school teams are asked about is the degree to which they meet criteria, quality indicators for each of the items of the measure. So for example, tier 1 is a critical component of integrated MTSS. And so in the measure, we get at the degree to which the tier 1 is evidence-based, differentiated, and delivered with fidelity. Another aspect of fidelity is specificity, and how does the measure capture something unique about IMTSS versus PBIS, for example. And our scale is all about assessing integration and how that academic side of the tiered system and the social, emotional, behavioral side talk to each other and complement each other to better meet students' comprehensive needs. And no other measure that has been tested rigorously in research does this. The other thing we get at, another aspect of fidelity, is duration or dose, I guess you could say, because to reach the highest rating category, there's a requirement of having an item in place for at least 2 years so that it is more rooted as a part of the system. And then we also get at responsiveness, which is another aspect of Fidelity, because all of the items ask the school to reflect on the degree to which the needs of all students and staff are being met and adapted to in the implementation effort. So this is just something that I haven't really fully elaborated on in prior conversations of the tool, but I think are important for us to note, because when we have fidelity measures that get at multiple aspects of fidelity, then we know that our data can be enriched. All right, so we are on at time for another discussion opportunity. I'm just going to take a peek at the clock. I think we could go to a short breakout, or we could do whole group. And I think actually, Jennifer, I'll ask for your guidance on this. We could do about another 8 minutes in a breakout, or we could do whole group. What do you think would work better?
We could do a quick poll where we ask folks to give a thumbs up if
Ah.
they would like to stay whole group. So choose the react button is there's a little heart at the bottom of your screen.
Yes.
And if you
Yep.
want to stay whole group for the discussion, please choose your thumbs up.
See a couple of, yeah, they're okay.
Yeah, so whole group.
Thumbs up are happening.
Yeah.
Great. All right, let's do that. All right, so there was our whirlwind tour of the INFR and how that addresses various aspects of integrated tiered systems of support. And I've got a lot of questions for you on this slide. You can pick and choose the one that resonates the most for you that you think is important to talk through, or maybe you've got a question of your own that you'd like to get out to the group. And so I will open it up to our first brave soul who will volunteer to share their reactions, reflections, or questions.
Hi. So for our state, I work in Virginia, and one of the things that we have been using for the longest time, years ago, we started off with the benchmarks of quality, and we went over to the tiered fidelity inventory. But we do implement MTSS. And so I will say one of the things that we kind of struggle with a little bit is we know TFI kind of tends to focus on behavior. And so there has been, a lot, if you all recall, over the years of creating companion guides or altering the TFI to focus on like read literacy, academics, and everything else. So then we started looking at other options out there to look at more of an MTSS type of measure for implementation. And what we found is that there's a lot out there, a lot of states and people have developed their own, but some of them are really expansive. Like some of them are extremely time consuming. And I'm not sure, like we've kind of struggled is like, what is the best one to match like measuring MTSS implementation at the school level? Because it seems that everybody has kind of, MTSS is very contextual. It's kind of built off of your contextual situation within districts and schools and such. And while there are key components, how people kind of start off and build, like there's some common core pieces, but then there's a lot of other factors at play. I don't know. I guess I was just wondering if when I was looking at this, is that it just brings to mind those questions that we always have of, are we using the best implementation measure to match our, what we're instead of tailoring every measure or every instrument out there to our unique situation, like trying to find a measure that kind of kind of strongly connects to what we're doing that we could also use as, comparable. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling at this point and everybody's just kind of staring at me.
It was not rambling for me, just so you know, Amanda. It made perfect sense. I think it made perfect sense to Jennifer, and that's what counts in this situations. And she's got ideas.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I will definitely say I know there's a lot of wisdom in this room. And so I'll start us off on responding to what you have to say, but I definitely think we should other people will have a lot to contribute in the question that you posed for us. And yes, there are a lot of tools that are out there. In fact, to the point where I started to put this draft together for Ohio, I'll acknowledge I know Amy and others from the Ohio team are on this call, and we're working with some of the IMTSS Research Network members that I mentioned a few moments ago to finalize and get this out to everyone, because right now it's just kind of in draft form and not widely shared. But the questions that you're asking about are, how do we know all of these tools that are out there? How do we know how to select one? What is the way that we can think about this? And so that is the whole purpose of this tool. And there's 3 questions to consider. Number 1, what are you trying to implement? So you mentioned MTSS, and that's the first thing to think about. What is it in fact that you are implementing? Because sometimes what we intend to implement is not actually what we are implementing. And so that's a consideration. And then this is a grid. I think I already shared this on a slide that displays the different types of tiered systems, because again, what we have called maybe MTSS may be more like PBIS because it only includes behavior, or maybe it's more like RTI because it's more focused on an academic tiered system, or maybe it is about integration where those 2 sides talk to each other. So thinking more critically about, all right, what is it that we are truly trying to implement based on, the different types of tiered systems that we know exist? And then what do we want to answer? What are those questions, which I think you've also kind of started to identify what you want to better understand. Perhaps it's the degree to which schools are implementing MTSS or PBIS or whatever the tiered system is. But excuse me, just really getting specific on what you're trying to assess. And then some other considerations, like, does it matter to you and to your users in your schools if the measure is valid and reliable? Sometimes that matters and sometimes it doesn't. Does it matter how long it took? You mentioned feasibility of it, because that is a factor. So really thinking about what is it that is important features of the tools. And then we've started to put together a list of the tools. It looks like you've done this work already. You've looked and explored, and what we hope to have here is kind of a one-stop shop of various tools that are out there that summarize, if they have reliability and validity data, what grade level they're applicable for, how long does it take to administer, because that matters, and the schedule. Is it once a year? Is it 3 times a year? Who does it? That also is a consideration. And then coming back to this column here, what's the focus? Because we want to select a tool that is measuring what we not only intend to implement, but are implementing. And so I can share this draft with the group if that's helpful. And, you can kind of maybe use this to help come to some clarity about, how do we want to approach this? What is the best tool that's going to get at those questions that we want to answer in a way that is feasible for us to use? So that was a very long answer to your question, but I'll open it up also to the group because I'd love to hear others' thoughts.
I posted in the chat, but I was just wondering about the IMFR and noticed in the table it said like for adapting to other grade levels, because that was our question in terms of middle school and high school. So we were kind of defaulted back to the TFI because that's what our schools are used to, and it's for continuation data. But I was just curious if it will be tested with other grade levels or adapted at some point. I know it's a new tool, so thank you for creating it.
Yeah, thank you. There is a team on this call that is using it at the middle school, high school level, and that is the Ohio team. Not to put them on the spot, but they are trying it out, and they might have some insight as to what it has looked like for them to make those adaptations. I think I saw a comment already in the chat from Amy about, some of their work that they've done to try to bring their data sources together. But also, you want to talk or learn a little bit more about adapting it. Happy to do that, and even informally kind of test driving it in the schools that you might want to pilot it in. We can absolutely do that. We have, our world's a little different than it has been in the past. We're not sure what kind of research opportunities will be out there, but there's definitely a strong interest from the research side, from the INFR study team members, of continuing this line of research to formally develop and test a measure. And until then, I think the work can informally happen through a more practical research setting, which is in the schools in which that you work.
Yeah, Jennifer, I'm Amy Troyer from Ohio, and we are using this, yes, in middle schools and high schools. And honestly, we have not found too much adapting or changing that you have to do. Sometimes there might be some very little wording that you might adjust a little within a question. So it's an interview. It's completed by interview of a school team. And so once in a while you might reword a little something, but for the most part, besides the fact it's just not validated at that level, we use it at middle and high school. So we have whole districts using it. We also are kind of looking at, we're trying to help our districts. We have at district level, some of them are wanting to look at like all their buildings together because it's by building. So you do it, each building completes it. And so we're trying to help them pull all that data all together so that leadership within a district can also look at the kind of their whole system and what they think of it. So that's been different. And then it is we have a couple months here where we're really having on our list to break down the RTFI, the TFI, crosswalk them, and then the INFR is divided into domains. They're very different. You use them for very different reasons. So first I will say that, but we're just trying to make the connection with what you're doing here in literacy and behavior. It has to tie, it would tie to your system, your integrated system. So then we're trying to make the connection of where they might fit in the domains of the INFR, if that makes sense. So, but it's been it's been tough and we're not there yet, but we hope to get there and get what we kind of have how it's set up, how we need to pull the data that we need to really help our districts dive into all those things. So anyway, just thought I'd say that. But we love like Jennifer did you did this great video. I'm just gonna say she did a great also if you use it, we have this great video that she just did for us on like how do you help them use the information then, like a building. And so sometimes they get stuck on all this data, all this information, and then they don't, why don't you freeze? It's like data freeze, right? They don't know what to do with it. So she just sent us a really great video that's short, sweet, but really helps like how to use it. So thought I'd throw that out there too.
Yeah. And I think we've hit on that. This is hard, especially when it's something system-wide that we're doing and maybe a little bit of a newer twist, evolution of a tiered system. And so how do you make all of that work if you've got existing measures in place? And I know we only have 1 minute left. So I think this is, I had a feeling we'd have way more to talk about than we'd have time. But if you don't have the resources and that were mentioned here, just in passing, plus the ones that I've got in our slides, I'd be happy to pass those along. If you don't have that, I can share that. And then in our last few seconds, I'll turn it over to Jennifer and or John to see if there's anything closing out that we need to do.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, so we are always interested when you all hear something that you want to know more about or get more in depth about, you just have to let us know, because unfortunately my mind reading skills are not great. And I don't know that, John, you have any, right? Mind reading?
No, though I try to tell my kids I can read their minds.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. Only for teenagers though. For
Yeah.
the grown-ups, it really doesn't work anymore. So anyways, we do want to know what you all want to know more about and get more in depth with. But Jennifer, this was fantastic, as it always is. Thank you for being generous with your time and coming back to visit with us again.